Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Property Particulars Podcast. And today, my guest is Sabah Siddiq. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you.
Good. So, welcome to not only the podcast, welcome to LA, because you're relatively new in joining us here.
Yes, I am. I think it's coming up to 4 weeks, so it'll be 4 weeks, 7th of November.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. So we are, we haven't hung around here. You started with us and we're getting you straight on the podcast.
Yes, you've got me straight on the podcast. It's my first ever podcast, so I'm a little bit nervous.
Exciting.
But exciting.
Hopefully it'll all be fine. I'm not going to
Yeah.
ask anything too tricky. So you've come to join us in the planning and infrastructure team, which is in our London office and Southampton. So tell us a bit about your team here and how you and your journey as a lawyer.
Yes, so I've joined the planning infrastructure team. They're based in Southampton, so it's two partners, and there's myself, and then we've got a couple of paralegals and chartered legal executives. So that's the whole team.
Okay.
In terms of my journey, so I come. My background, I sort of trained in local authority in-house.
Okay.
I joined as a legal admin assistant after done my degree and my LPC. So I was looking for a training contract, and as a sort of door into sort of getting some experience, I applied for a legal admin assistant in the planning department in-house. It was a maternity cover, and so I did 8 months, and then I left, and because the lady came back. But what happened? She ended up leaving and moving to Canada.
Okay.
So I was asked to come back.
Okay.
And so for a permanent job.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I said to them was, they knew I was looking for a training contract. And so I worked in the planning department as a legal admin assistant for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
And then I was offered a training contract in-house.
So you did that in-house as well?
Yeah,
Okay,
so it
cool.
so it was a progression within in-house planning department. And that's how I fell into planning in a way. So I did my training contract in-house. I did, and I had sort of 6 months taken off because I was doing some legal work.
Excellent. Yeah, we like when that happens.
So it was all good experience. And so I qualified, and they offered me a qualified position in planning.
Amazing.
So
it's quite interesting to hear, because you don't hear that journey often. I mean, I have got some friends from my training contract days back up north, and they had done friends from uni that had done that route through local authority. So it's not unusual at all, but it's just quite nice to hear for all of the younger ones that are still coming through that there are different routes through to where you want to get to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wasn't actually looking to go in-house. It's just, again, so I wanted to, and I hadn't studied planning, obviously. I did property law, land law, and I was interested in sort of commercial side of when I sort of did my studies. I did sort of commercial law and media entertainment, sort of that sort of, so my experience with local authority when I qualified, it was just been, it was always interesting.
Okay.
And the work I had, the exposure I had, because it's a small team, so you do get exposed to, you are kind of thrown in a bit of a deep end.
Yes, I can imagine.
So it was a steep learning curve, put it that way, but it gave me the experience of just learning the basics of planning and how local authorities work and what it is, just learning just the terminology. I was, all was really new to me. Cool. And I enjoyed it because there was always something new and different.
New to learn.
New to learn. And, within sort of 2 years of qualifying, there was the principal, which is like the head of, like the team leader for planning. She ended up leaving. And so they had few locums, and then because it was a small team, I kind of ended up picking up every time there was a bit of a changeover in staffing. I was sort of picking up a lot of the staff, and then so I ended up applying for the post as a principal within 2 years, which was quite a brave thing to do, because it involved management and managing a team as well as doing the law. So I was an interim team leader for 1 year, and then I was made a principal, which is what is called planning solicitor in local authority. I was in charge. I had one paralegal, 2 solicitors, and I had a consultant as well. So that was the team I was working with.
You've come from such a great background knowledge, and now we've nabbed you into the LA culture. I know you're still new to us, but you're going to be working so you're here in London, but also based down in Southampton. So you're a bit between the two offices
Yes.
as well just now.
Yeah, that's right. So I work 2 days in Southampton and I'm coming to London.
Yeah.
So I'll be working from both offices.
Yeah,
And
which for us is great. We love to have
Yeah.
more new people in the London office as we've moved to this lovely new
Yeah.
location that we're in.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you join us. And I think even we've discussed just last week that we might even be getting another person, a paralegal,
Yes,
joining
we've
soon.
got another paralegal joining
Yeah,
next week.
and that's going to
Actually,
be here in
London.
for
Yeah.
part-time.
So we've got a growing
Yeah,
team. So
exactly, we love it.
So
Which adds extra skills to which we'll come on to now. So I suppose for me in residential property, when we're buying different types of property, and I have to go, well, not just me, our whole team have to go out to all the other different teams within LA whenever we need that type of expertise for a particular transaction or something. And so if we switch to kind of talking a bit about planning law and how I sometimes do get your team involved, I thought I'd ask you a couple of questions about it. So one of the things definitely that we have seen in the last year or two that's happening more and more is our clients buying property here in London or elsewhere around the country, and it's listed building, and the seller, and part of our due diligence pack is obviously to go through everything that's been done, any previous works, and yeah, there's a lot more implications when it's listed building.
yes, definitely. I think the difference between a listed building and just another development with planning permission is that certain works in a listed building internally will require planning permission. So it's always, and also if you do works without any permission or consent, the council can have powers to prosecute, so it carries a criminal liability.
Yes, which is scary.
Which is quite scary.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to sort of, if something comes up in the inquiries, to get it checked.
Yeah.
And what sort of architectural special features are listed, and what can be done and what can't be done.
Yeah, I think because as some of our younger team have gone through more and more examples of listed building, because sometimes you can be buying a property and it's only some aspects of the property that's actually listed.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and actually we did one,
Yeah.
I think it was last year, and I did get some of your colleagues before you arrived to help me with it a bit, because it was just, I think it was just the railings along the front of the Georgian house that was the listed element of it.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would be listed. Yeah.
But they had wanted to do some works to that straight away. And I referred them to your team.
Yeah.
So not only was that just additional help that I got from your team, is that the client actually then instructed the planning team to look into some aspects to give them advice on that listed building aspect, which for us in our Resi team is great value to have you there sitting with us in the room downstairs if ever we need that. Now, one of the other examples that I've definitely had and passed to the planning team in the last year or so was a client coming to me, and clients come to us to get quote. They say buying a property, they tell me the price, we get a quote, we have a little chat, and quite often when the heads of terms come out from the agent, we actually then realise, oh, this is a much bigger scope of job than I initially thought. And sometimes I've seen recently in the last year or two is that we will be buying a residential property, but it's maybe a bit more rural than central London, but it's got planning permission, not implemented planning permission. And so they want to buy it to obviously develop to whatever. And then I need help because they need to have advice on that whole planning permission.
Yes, definitely. I think it's worth getting it checked, because there's a couple of things you would want to advise, or the new purchaser would want to be aware of, is the time limit, because every permission has a condition, says it has to be implemented within 3 years. So how much time you have left, and also the other fundamental thing for the purchaser would be there can be Section 106 monies due. That could be triggered on commencement. There can be obligations in a legal agreement, and also SIL can be triggered on implementation. So there's certain trigger points, and it's always good to get those checked out, so the purchaser can understand if he was to implement this permission, what the full implications could be. And if he was to amend the scheme, and what if he wants to change it, things like, again, we can advise them on sort of amending applications under Section 73A. So there's a whole lot of considerations for the purchaser.
And actually, you just made me think of another thing there when you
Yeah.
said it. So quite often in our local authority searches,
Yeah.
we get a lot of planning terminology. And sometimes we just need a bit of help from your team. Sometimes it'll turn into a client needing advice on it. But one that you mentioned there, SIL, which gets talked about a lot, but what actually does SIL stand for, and what do we do for that when we
Yes.
see that in our local authority search?
So SIL stands for Community Infrastructure Levy. It's
Yeah.
a tax on a property.
Okay.
So it's regulated under a regulation. It's Community Infrastructure Regulation 2010. There's been a lot of amendments made to that regulations. So in effect, what it is, it's a net additional charge. So of a net increase in the. So if you're building a house or you're building an extension, if it's over 100 square meters, there is a levy that's charged. And the levy that is charged depends on the area that you live in.
Yeah.
And there's a charging schedule for each local authority, and they're called charging authority, basically.
Okay.
And so it will be all set out already. So there's a calculation, SIL calculation that's done, which produces a figure of how much is payable on that net additional floor space.
Sure.
So, but there are certain things that can be exempt or deducted, like demolition, certain sort of types of development also. Anything under 100 square meters is exempt, so you don't have to pay SIL on it. But yeah, it's one that comes up quite a lot because it's very procedural, and a lot of people don't understand it and don't take the right advice and end up with a big, the council authority serving a liability notice saying this huge amount is due. And then, you have people coming or asked to advise at that point, which is sometimes a bit late.
A bit too late.
It's very little.
As early as possible.
Yeah, it's early, definitely, or SIL. That's why I would say,
sure.
Take advice as early as possible you can.
And so some of the other items that come up, which we see a lot of, especially maybe, and this is now probably is more so in London, unless it's a regional plot that we're buying, but is Section 106 that we'll see on our local authority search results as well a lot. Especially I see them a lot for some of the new build developments that we're on panels for. And sometimes that's a bit too much for us to. There's a lot of information on a local authority search to do with 106s, and sometimes we do need your help. And actually, one of the interesting things is that we'll see so many discharge bits. And I'm always a bit confused by them.
So I mean, Section 106 will secure either infrastructure or contributions towards, and there are certain trigger points for that to be done. So if it's a new build, the developer will have obligations to sort of either make contributions either at commencement, or it could be later in occupation. If it's a big development, it could be the triggers for some of them can be quite later on. And I have in the past come across where it was a small builder and he hadn't paid affordable housing contribution, sold the land, and the local authority were going after the purchaser as well as the developer. So it's it runs with the land.
That's the key bit, isn't it? So one of the time when we see it on purchases that we're doing, we automatically go to that, have all the conditions being discharged, is anything passing with the land. Now, quite often though, for me, helpfully, when I'm doing plots in a new build development, sometimes you do see that exemption that says it doesn't pass to plot purchases. Which is helpful for me, I think, in those particular developments. But when it's anything else, we can come to you and get the correct advice.
So you can have conditions which are attached to planning permission. So they often, if they are discharged, that will come up on your search. Or if they're not, then obviously I think you decide whether, if it's not clear, whether you get indemnity cover. And same sort of planning obligations, requirements, that's separate. So again, if there's any obligation, have they been discharged? So if you're not sure, again, you can either make further inquiries. And sometimes it may have been discharged, but it's just not clear. You can write to the local authority and they can say yes. Or, the option is, I think sometimes you take an indemnity insurance if it's not clear or you're not got a clear further reply. So.
Cool. Thank you. Interesting. And so one of the other things which I have seen again recently is enforcement notices. Which when we see that on our local authority search result, panic a little bit and try and work out if there is if it's positive entry that's there, because do you come across them a lot? Are they?
Yes, enforcement is again is quite common, and what it is basically, and you would see an enforcement notice. It's the council would have served that if there's been a breach of planning control.
Okay.
So someone's built something or done something, change of use, operational development, haven't got permission, and it's they haven't been able to get permission or retrospectively or it can't.
Sure.
The council will serve a note. It's a legal notice. It's binding on purchasers, land, subsequent purchasers, and it sets out the requirements what they need to do in order to comply with the.
Okay.
And the other, again, you have to be quite careful with the enforcement notices. If the requirements haven't been complied with, it can become a criminal offence.
Okay.
After the period of compliance, because it will say 6 months, 3 months, you've got to do this, and then it becomes a criminal offence, and you can be prosecuted and fined.
Gosh.
So it goes. There's So
Scary again.
so planning is quite There's
all these things. Our conclusion here and all these points is that we need to get the correct advice from our planning team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, we're going to switch a bit to more fun things as we come to the end of our episode of this Property Particulars podcast. So tell me, what is maybe the most exciting job or transaction that you've been involved with? Maybe not here, because you've not been here too long yet.
No, yeah. So this was when I was in-house local authority lawyer in one of the local authorities I was working with. So we had Localism Act. This was back in 2011, 13, 14.
Okay.
So new act came out, Localism Act 2011, and neighbourhood planning was a new thing. So we had an application put in by a neighbourhood forum to be designated as a forum.
Okay.
And it included an area which was subject to already a planning application, Taylor Wimpey, and it was already going through, and we would have granted permission for it. It was an ex-RAF base, and they wanted to include that area into the neighbourhood area red line. It literally just come out. The council granted the forum the area, but excluded the sort of strategic site. It was considered a strategic site because it was already too far advanced, and it was considered strategic and not just to that neighbourhood area. And we got challenged to say that as a local authority, we didn't have the power or the discretion to exclude it.
Okay.
We didn't refuse it, but we just excluded the site. And so it went to High Court, and we won. And then it was challenged to the Court of Appeal, and we won. And it was the first case on the law, landmark case on the point. On that point of law, so that was the most interesting.
And were you there in court?
Yes, I was in court of, so that was my highlight, because just sitting in front of three planning, master of role and judges was just, fascinating.
To see that side of it. Which you don't, maybe when you're a trainee coming through the ranks and you think, planning, you might not think it can.
Yeah. So planning has contentious, and this was the contentious side, and I enjoy that side of planning. Yeah,
I love it. Fascinating. Yeah. Okay, one final last question. I'll move away from planning now. Okay, so you've got some visitors coming to see you. Yeah. You're out and about for a nice day in London. Where do you go? What do you do?
I like experiences type of things, and so I'll probably take them for an afternoon tea to Shard of Lakes for the good views, the food. And then you can go up and then see them. So that's probably something like that, just to, because I've done that myself. Or afternoon tea at Ritz Hotel.
Oh, yes, I've never done it at the Ritz.
Yeah, so
I've done it at Fortnum and Mason.
Yeah, it's quite good. I would say that's probably one of the good ones, but you get quite a lot for it's a good experience.
All right, Sabah, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
That's okay, thank you. Join us again soon for another episode of Property Particulars podcast, and please do check out our social media channels at Leicester Aldridge Property on Instagram.